But now let's cross to one of the key battleground states in the United States, Pennsylvania, with our Washington correspondent, Annelise Nielsen. I spoke with her a little earlier. Annelise, thank you so much for your time. Donald Trump has just announced he's suing over voter suppression. Can you tell us more about this?
Suing and won. The judges just made the ruling a short time ago. Essentially, the issue they were talking about was voters who were in line in Bucks County for early voting. So how it happens here in Pennsylvania, and remember, in America, it's different in every state, the rules around voting, and each county local level gets to set how those rules are administered. So in Bucks County, they found that they had enormous numbers of people lining up to cast their early ballots. How it happens here is you line up, you get your mail ballot, the same one that would be mailed out to you, but many Pennsylvanians have been saying they haven't been receiving their mail-in ballots. They've been getting lost in the mail, so they go line up, get handed a ballot, they can fill it in on the spot, hand it back to them, and their ballot's cast early. So what happened was they had so many people in line, the local officials early in the afternoon said, that's it, you're done, go home. And people in line had the right to be there until 5 p.m. and anyone in line at 5 p.m., no matter how far away it was, even if it took hours to get them through, if you're in line by 5 p.m, you should have the right to vote. And so this is what the Trump campaign sued over and won. A judge has said, yes, these voters were disenfranchised when we kicked them out of line. So now they have additional days throughout the week to go do this early voting ahead of voting next week on Tuesday in person, which is the last chance for people to vote here in Pennsylvania.
We've seen Joe Biden's garbage comment where he basically called half of America, all of the Trump supporters, garbage. Kamala Harris now trying to distance herself from this. Will this hurt her campaign, do you think, in a similar way to Hillary Clinton's basket of deplorable comment really damaged hers?
Well, look, one of the things that we're looking at here is the fact it's happened late in the game. We're only 6 days out from the presidential election here, so many Americans have already cast their ballots. About a third, the last time I looked, of people who are likely to vote have cast their ballot. But the issue is they have been putting forward this idea that they are the party that's going to bring people together, and it's Donald Trump who's divisive. So when you have Kamala Harris in this iconic rally outside the White House trying to draw the comparison to January 6th, at the same time you have Joe Biden inside just calling Donald Trump's supporters garbage and then trying to walk it back through the press office, people pick up on that. And we've heard from that. We've heard that from people on the ground here in Pennsylvania today. This is one of the critical battleground states for both campaigns to try to win the Electoral College vote. So yes, it will absolutely cut through. And what the real issue is that I think hasn't been emphasized enough in all this is the fact that this is the problem the Harris campaign has had from the get-go, where they're trying to separate themselves from Biden. He's been leaving days open, according to Axios, and they've been leaving him hanging because they don't want him on the campaign trail with him. He's seen as a liability, and he's left to his own devices like this, and it does cause these issues, fractures, because people realise that she's been working with him for 4 years, and they realise that he's got issues with his cognitive abilities at the moment, his memory, and it is that just absolute juxtaposition that we're seeing. We have this new start, and at the same time we've got Joe Biden still in this position doing these things when people know there's a problem.
Annelise, you know, we're just days out, as you said, 6 days to go. Can you take us through where the polls are at the moment, especially in those 7 battleground swing states?
Look, this is one of the really fascinating things with the polls at the moment. They're just neck and neck. We're just seeing 50-50 splits. We're seeing polls will come out with a few points here and there for either campaign. It looks like Donald Trump's pulling ahead, but we're still within the margin of error. And I can tell you from having been on the ground for the last 5 weeks almost, talking to people in battleground states, the polls are exactly what we're seeing on the ground. People aren't enthusiastic either way. People are feeling very downtrodden about the whole thing. And I think that's really interesting when we compare it to 2020, when there was so much friction. People were feeling passionate. We've had anecdotes from across the country of people not having as many signs stolen out of their yards, of bartenders telling us they don't have to break up as many political fights as they used to because people aren't feeling overwhelmed about either candidate. But what we also compare that to is the early voting. We are breaking records across the country. Georgia alone is such a huge indicator. And what we saw in Pennsylvania as well is the number of people who've been voting early. It's drastically there's a drastic uptick for Republicans, and that is a huge change from 2020 when they were told stay home, don't go to the polls early, do it on a day in person, otherwise you can't trust it. Now they're being told do whatever it takes to get your vote in early, we'll have the other fights later, and it looks like it's working for the Republicans.
Right, Annelise Nielsen, really appreciate your time joining us from the ground in Pennsylvania.